with Leah. How are you doing today, Leah? Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, I'm doing well. I will admit I'm a wee bit stressed because my final thesis for my master's is due. It's like
Yo.
it's fake thesis. It's due today.
Oh, is it done?
No. But
What?
it'll be done
What are you
after
doing
this.
here? What are you doing? What is going on?
Having fun. I'm
You have
ignoring my
no
responsibilities until further notice.
No, that's great. That's great. I got so John, my co-host on the Left Wing, he was contacted by someone who was in she was in I don't know, I forgot what school she's in, but she's doing her master's thesis, and it's something about social media stuff. And so she reached out and interviewed him for, and then he recommended her to me. And so I'm doing an interview with her on Tuesday. And I was like, oh man, I remember doing like interviews for my master's thesis. I remember doing that stuff and everything, and just reaching out to people to go over stuff. It's like, oh man, like I don't envy you guys. I don't like. I always said that. I've said this for years that people love learning, but they hate school. I don't know if that counts for you, but
100%. It's the constant assignments. The one that gets to me is I was just talking to someone who's she's becoming a physician assistant. And so we were talking because I'm going to med school in August. And she was telling me how they had to take a class on burnout. And then they had to write an essay on what they learned in said burnout class. And I'm like, that's how you burn us out, is by making us do all of these useless assignments. Not saying that my fake thesis, because I'm in a public health program, so it's not a regular thesis. But yeah, I do agree with that. I love learning, and I've learned so much more in the past 2 years with my hybrid master's program than I think I did in undergrad. But maybe I'm just biased because I'm currently in it. So,
well, and so all right, I'm seeing how much we have in common with this here. So glad you agree with that, because I think this applies to most people, because like kids love learning like that. You know, they ask 1,000 questions because they're brand new to the world. Yeah, it's great. And then we beat that curiosity out of them, you know,
quite literally.
Literally sometimes, yeah. But there's so much to know and explore about the world, and then you annoy adults with questions. One, because they don't feel like answering them, and a lot of times they don't know the answers themselves, and they feel embarrassed.
God, yes. Yep.
And so I remember, like in school, I was a C student in high school. In fact, when I started my my social media account, I wanted to call it C Student Politics. That was my first name I had, because I don't know about you, but I get really frustrated when people can't figure out real simple shit. Because look, people, if a C student like me can figure this shit out, like you guys can definitely do it. But as I progressed more and more, my grades got better and better. Like my master's course, I finished with a 3.84 GPA, like, which I never had in high school. But I realized that the further you went on education, the more it suited my skills, which were
writing. You can also pick your classes. You can
pick your classes. Yes.
It's almost as if when you're doing things that you're interested in and that you care about, that you're going to put in more energy and enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I definitely had a similar experience, at least from high school. Yeah, high school. I will admit, I always got somewhat. I mean, it was interesting. Before I got my ADHD diagnosis as a kid, I was a straight C was the best I could do. Mm-hmm. It was really, I was trying my best and I just couldn't get higher than that. And I was really trying back then too, which is sad to think about. But once that I got my meds, I went very similar amounts of effort. It was just that, I can finish the test kind of on time now, or, I can focus for longer than 3 seconds at a time. But then once that I got to college, that was the more that I got into the programs that I enjoyed, like the more that I got into anthropology, the more that I got into medicine, the more that I got into public health. I was like, okay, I'll actually do your readings. Like, I kind of enjoy this. So like, I'll actually listen versus the other ones. Like, you put me in a math class? No.
God, I was so bad at math. That's so funny. But no one is here except me. Is that what's happening here? Oh, we're just bullshitting. Just before we get into like that, just feeling out the beginning of the interview. Just talking about school, which you didn't plan on doing, but yeah, it's pretty great. So not picking your class is a good point. That's true. That's especially after your freshman, sophomore year, when you get to your basics and they force you to take out of the way and get the stuff you really want to. But it also played to my skills of writing and public speaking, which is I was way better at than most other people. And so it made it seem like I was just, working harder. No, not really. It's just I happened to get better.
It's just your skills.
Yeah, and I remember watching something. I think it was Finland. I want to say it was Finland, and how they handle like history classes. In that, so in the United States, you're in ninth grade history, and they say, okay, so this month we're going to be covering World War One and all the stuff around World War One. We're going to talk about, the Archduke Ferdinand, Gavril Princip, all the alliances and stuff, all the battles, and it's a very regimented. But then this guy was talking about his class. He's like, well, what we do is like, so we're going to cover this month, world history or whatever history from 1900 to 1930. And at the end of this month, you give the class presentation on literally anything you want, as long as it happened between 1900 and 1930. They will find something. They will find something they're excited about, that they're interested in. You don't got to force them to do it, and they'll learn history. They'll learn a hell of a lot more than you give them a list of dates. Yes.
Well, and that to me is, and I know that what we're going to talk about, what's on schedule for later, so this is kind of a perfect segue, but I really do think that you learn so, and I'm not just saying this because I was a TA for many, many years, but you learn so much more by teaching and by actually explaining things. Like all of my content, part of the reason why I have slowly gotten so much better at it and so much more knowledgeable is because you learn as you do it. Like if I'm going to make a video about something, I have to do the research. I have to find a way to communicate it that's going to be appropriate for the audience, but also engaging. All of those skills to me are infinitely more useful than taking, especially a multiple choice test. I'm like, when am I in my real life, am I going to be given option A through D and I'm going to pick the best one? Because I promise you that's not the situation. I have to come up with the options. And that always did really upset me, that a lot of my school was based on like that test format of either you have it in you or you don't. And it was very just, I teach you, you don't teach me. You're the student. Sit down, be a kid, listen to me because I know everything. And as someone who's curious too, and who didn't really get it successfully beat out of me, like they don't really enjoy when you keep on asking questions because they have their plan and they have their class plan and they're going to stick to it. But yeah, I definitely think that that's really interesting that we both agree with that and that we both ended up here. I don't think that that's a coincidence.
No, not at all. And in the multiple choice thing you mentioned, not only are you, I guess sometimes you're like, okay, I know the problem is either A, B, or C, but you know what? You're not expected to memorize that. You can reference, something to help you out in your actual life. Like no one's going to there's not like split second decision making in most options like that.
And even as someone who was in those situations as an EMT where it is split second, you know what we have access to before we get to that call that we are highly recommended that we do, which is Google what we are going to. Now, I'm not saying that every single dispatch is right because they're not always right. They will say that someone stubbed their toe and you get there and it's a broken leg. Other flip side, they'll say that they broke their leg. You get there, they stubbed their toe. But the point is that regardless of what you think it's going to be, you have that 10-minute, most of the time, drive.
Yeah.
Where you can review what it is. And God, it made me so mad when I was on the ambulance when there would be people who I could tell that they didn't know an answer. And instead of just saying the words, I do not know, give me a second to look it up, which like I often did. I have my phone. If you tell me that you have a medical condition that I have never heard of before in my entire life, I'm not going to pretend that I know what rare condition you have. I'm going to Google it and try and learn as much as I can. I'm going to be honest with you about my strengths and weaknesses. And God, that just,
that's difficult for people to do. If for some reason it's difficult, and it might be, you know what? I never made this connection. It might be because of school. Like I don't know if maybe it's just a natural human instinct. I don't know, but it might be.
No, we're taught that saying I don't know is not okay because you're supposed to have the answers. And I definitely think that goes back to school because you're never in a test situation. If you don't know, you're screwed. So we're taught that at such a young age that it's not a good thing to say. And so few adults say it that we don't have really good role models, especially people who are in positions of authority. And I really do think that that's one of the most negative aspects of our schooling system is that people grow up not feeling comfortable to say, I don't know, or I'm sorry, I was wrong. Like,
oh, you beat me to it. Jesus Christ. I was like,
just say those two things.
I had it ready. I was like, the other one is no one wants to admit they're wrong. And it's incredible. Then again, all right. So how do I say this without sounding like a dick? Like for people like us, I think it might be easier because I assume people think about you because I do, and everyone else seems to, that they're like, okay, well, this is a smart person. And so if I say I don't know, or hey, I was wrong about that, it's not really held against me. It's like, and then, but I was like, well, why doesn't everyone do it? But then I guess not everyone has that option, because like if you're in a precarious situation and then you fuck up and you admit it, or you're just like, hey, I don't know, I'll find out, it could be kind of to punish you. But that just goes back to the whole cultural problem with that, because there shouldn't be an issue with that, because that's good. That's good that you admit that you don't know. And also, I was going to get into beginning is that I first ran into you about a year ago, I think. And it was a video, because it's funny when you said that how it's true, you do get better and better, but I feel like I ran into your account pretty early on. And you had done a video talking about how communism is something that people ask you. I remember the line you used, that when I say I want communism, you come forward with a bunch of questions. I have to solve every single problem that could exist, even for your grandmother or something. And that when in reality, you should be trying to convince me why this system is good. Like, why is it the other way around? That's the first video I saw of yours. And I thought that was incredible. Like, it was a really good, had a lot of explanatory power. So you were pretty good at it from the beginning, or I guess I mean at the beginning, but
I will say that you were like saying, what, did I come in at an early time? If that was the video that introduced you, unless you got to it real late, which based on how long we have been talking, I've only been doing this for a bit over a year and a half.
That's about right. Yep, sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it would have been really early, and that was one of my first, like, out of my first 5 videos, 3 of them ended up going viral, and that was one of them. The other ones were, and that's what I've kind of learned over time, is that you're always going to have some hits and some misses. And you're going to think that the misses were bangers,
right?
And no one else will. Right? And you're just like, I thought it was funny. I'll just get myself back down.
Yeah, it is true. It's like sometimes with 1,000,000% certainty and you're correct. But then other times like, oh, this is definitely good. And it's like, oh, it just is all right. Like, that's weird. That's I don't know. Because like I refuse to believe that my judgment is that far off. Like sometimes it just like TikTok, I don't really do it on Instagram or anything, but like it picks videos that it wants to push sometimes. And it's like that just happens. And so
it really, really does. You can't use it.
You can't, right? And also, so I started thinking about that. What do you think about this one? So I know that like we're gonna talk about Palestine eventually. We'll get to Palestine and everything, but with the Palestine stuff earlier on, I remember like a lot of us were discussing how a lot of the Palestine stuff was suppressed. Like, it wasn't posted at all, or maybe it was limited to outside of your For You page and stuff like that. Yeah. But then over time, I've seen that it hasn't been quite as bad as it was like 6 months ago. Yeah. And now I'm forced to, with the uncomfortable reality that a lot of people just don't care. That's the really sad thing, that people just like, yeah, all right, sure. And that's even worse. Honestly, it's even worse than it being held back.
Like if it were just the algorithm, then it's like some faceless corporation that's just trying to get the most profit out of us content creators. And then I'm like, okay, fair, this isn't the most profitable for you. That makes sense. But when I notice that it's not being suppressed, and that it's just that people would rather have especially like my regular run-of-the-mill, like communist good, capitalist bad, like when they just want that regular content, not that I don't enjoy making it, I love it, but I can just tell based on just like how energy is starting to dwindle, I think. But with that said, I will say that these encampments right now have sparked it a whole nother round. And I think that that's exactly what we needed, because I was starting to notice people just like starting to be like, okay, it's been 7 months. Like I've been in it for this long. I haven't seen anything change, which is like, welcome to our life on the left. Yeah. Like that's just how it is. Like if you want to be a part of the left, welcome, because that's just kind of what we're dealing with. Is that the status quo is very rigid and refuses to change. And I think that these encampments do really give me hope, but we'll talk about it later.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I say that too with the left, is that, look, this is not for the faint of heart here. Like you have got to just be comfortable with hundreds of years of stagnation. I'm sorry. Like that's just, that's the reality of the situation. So to get started, what I wanted to like, tell us a little about your background, where you grew up, the region, everything. I know that you have French. You actually, I don't know if you were born in France or you grew up there or anything like that, and how you got into social media and all that stuff.
Yeah. So a bit about me. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, which, now has become a hotbed for leftist politics, given Cop City and everything else, especially recent Emory protests. I also went to Emory for undergrad, which for the longest time, especially when I first started making content, I was terrified to say anything about my background because I was like, I don't want weird people knowing anything about me. But I've gotten more comfortable about it, especially in moments like these, to remind my alma mater, being Emory, that like, you accepted me. Not only that, but you gave me a fat scholarship. So either your judgment was way off or you should be listening to what we have to say. But yeah, so I was born and raised in Atlanta, but my mom is French. We were taught French at home. My mom is very, very strict French. In the sense that like the best story that I have to describe kind of who my mother is I broke my arm one time when I was like 9. My sister thought that it would be the funniest thing to tell me to climb up this tall, like, because I have 2 sisters, to climb up this, and they're older, to climb up this tall fence and then to jump on her back for a picture. Except she thought that it was really funny that when I went to jump, that she moved out of the way.
Oh no.
So naturally I fell and I crushed my elbow, and I ran inside to tell my mom, like, oh my God, like it hurt so bad. It was already swollen, like triple the size, and it being crushed and all that. This woman, I kid you not, sat at the counter sipping her coffee and did not look in my direction as I am sobbing because I was crying in English and not in French. So I was saying ow instead of I, and I was saying, can we please go to the hospital instead of est-ce qu'on peut aller à l'hôpital? So like that's just, and to be fair, to her credit, my French is incredible because of it. I pass off as, I mean, I am fluent. I'm a French citizen, but like a lot of people don't expect my French to come out as fluent as it does because I sound so fluent in English. Until then I forget the words and they all get jumbled up. But yeah, so that was a bit of my background in terms of that. So in the South, but in Atlanta, and raised by 2 physicians who hated being physicians towards the end of it. My dad is also a Vietnam vet.
No.
So he is on the older side. I was not playing.
Older than I would have guessed your dad would be. Yeah.
Yeah, he just hit 78. So
your dad is older than mine.
Yeah, and I'm 25. Yeah, so wow. And I just turned 25. So that's just important, I think, in terms of where my politics started out, because my politics, like both my parents are older. And on top of that, my dad was a Vietnam vet who did agree with some student protests back in his day of the 60s. Like he always talked about the civil rights movement nicely. He's from Philly. So like he's not from the South. But then when it came to Vietnam, that's when he would just kind of shut down and really not want to talk about politics, which, you know, given that he was drafted and sent there, I don't really want to ask too many questions. It sounds pretty bad.
I have to interject. I'm curious what your mom thought of the Vietnam War. Like I want her opinion of this.
My mom is 11 years younger than my dad, and my mom's politics can, I think, best be described as very French in their nature. So focused on French politics a lot more than American politics, even though she was living in the States, which I think is interesting. But she tends to be liberal leaning, like she is just a liberal. Mm-hmm. But with the French little touch of like when she talks about immigration in France, it's not good. But when she talks about like feminism and stuff, it's very good. So I would describe her as very much like a white feminist liberal, not to say that she doesn't have some amazing revolutionary radical qualities that I definitely take up after her. Like she was the first one to be like, yeah, the French Revolution was good. Like we should look up to people like that. So like she has that side of her, but I think that given that she went into medicine when she did, being like 60s, 70s as a woman, going into specifically a field that was not woman dominated, I think that influenced her politics more than anything else. And I think ever since that experience, she's kind of just been like laser focused on feminism and not the interconnections between the patriarchy, capitalism, and all that. But she refused to even talk about the Vietnam War, to the point where she loves going to Vietnam. She loves going to Vietnam because they speak some French there. Obviously, it used to be a French colony, and her best friend is Vietnamese. And she goes like as frequently as she's able. And whenever she goes, she turns to my dad and she's like, "Do you want to come?" And he's like, "No."
No.
So, which like makes sense. I don't think if I were drafted and sent to Vietnam, I don't think that I would want that. But also, my dad is very much. My mom out of the 2 is the one who would like grab the pitchfork and scream at a system. My mom is the one who would do that. My dad is like the fact that they drafted him is kind of funny to me because he's just the most pacifist person that you could ever meet. Like, he just hates it when anyone raises their voice. He despises arguments when they are like debates instead of conversations. Like, that's who he is. And so to the point where he doesn't see himself as a veteran. Like, on Veterans Day, on anything, he doesn't celebrate. He doesn't really talk about it ever, because to him, it's not the same as a veteran who chose to go. Because if it were up to him, he wouldn't have gone at all. And so he has a very weird relationship with that part of U.S. history. But coming back was what radicalized him to then move to France, which is where he met my mom. And so then he moved to France, went to med school in France, taught himself French as he was going to med school, which is, I could never. My French is as good as it is because my mom was strict, not because I have a natural talent. And so, so that's a bit of my background in terms of who I was raised by and where. I also went to the bougie, that's a lie. There are bougier schools in Atlanta, but one of the bougiest. And I went to one of the bougiest because it had the best language program. And my mom was the one thing that she wanted from us was to speak French. She didn't really care about anything else, math, nothing, history, nothing. She was just like, will she speak French? And so went to that school, very liberal school, very, 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 but like one of those liberals where they think that they figured it all out, that like they think that MLK is far in the past, and that MLK, like they only show pictures of MLK in black and white because they're like, this is in the past. We have moved on. We're better than that now. And I'm like, are we? So that was, and I went there from the age of 4 until 18 and then Emory. So I was kind of just liberal education all the way throughout, very much like, go vote, blue no matter who, but like at the same time still spouting and upholding a lot of the racist patriarchal ideology that led us here.
So before we get into ask you about your decision to the wild and irrational decision to start making content, I want to ask about your mom real quick, because it's very funny to me that, so as a Black person, you a lot of times we feel the need to fight against stereotypes and say, but your mom leaned into the French stereotype.
Truly. She will openly, like, I wasn't allowed to watch SpongeBob as a kid because, and I quote, that's stupid American television. So like, there's so many also cultural reference points that I just missed out on because she was making, and again, I love her for it in the sense that I do feel a lot more connected to France now than I think I ever would have without her influence. She has taught me a lot about speaking up. She has taught me how to be a trailblazer in so many ways, especially being the only woman at her practice for over like 25 years. So like, she has so many wonderful qualities that I look up to. But then on the flip end, she does really just lean into America bad. And my dad loves the States. As much as he hates the history and them sending him to Vietnam, he has so much of his family here. He has so much of growing up in history here that I don't think that he would ever want to permanently move to France. But my mom, I swear to God, if she could pick up all of her stuff and move tomorrow, she would.
Yeah. It down to so like the one thing I was in Europe as a kid, but on military bases, so not really in Europe because you're basically on American soil and everything. But the stereotype that I always heard about French people is like, look, if you don't already speak French, just don't bother, because like you walk over, like you say anything, parlez-vous français, like, okay, stop, just speak English to me. You're butchering my language. So that's what we hear about France all the time. And so
honestly, that is very, especially, I've traveled with some of my friends from high school who learned French growing up, but their accent's still pretty thick. They make mistakes. And I noticed that so much when they were talking, that the person that's French, who they're clearly speaking French well enough to like, I could have an easy conversation with them. Sure, they've got an accent. Sure, they're making a few mistakes, but I'm understanding them just fine. And these French waiters would, without a doubt, just always switch to English, which, to be fair, their English is oftentimes better.
Of course, yeah.
French. And so I kind of get it that way. But there would be some times where their English would be worse than the person's French. And I'm like, what are we doing? Why? We're trying and you're just giving up.
Yeah. Stop being dicks about it, France. I remember I was doing sophomore field work, I think, for education degree. And I was in a high school and we had an exchange student from Belgium. And we did popcorn reading, and so oh no, it wasn't popcorn reading. It was like down the line reading, paragraph, next student, paragraph, next student, paragraph, and I was in an 11th grade class, and I was never more embarrassed to be an American. And that's saying a lot because these kids would just stumble through this paragraph in their native fucking language. And then this Belgian girl who's French with a slight French accent just killed it. Just every single, I was like, oh, God damn it, guys, you're making me look bad here, in front of the foreigners. What the hell is going on? So yeah, I believe that. I believe that the English is often better or whatever. But so what made you make the horrible decision to, start putting yourself out there, making content for the ungrateful masses? What made you start doing this?
Honestly, that's how it feels sometimes. But honestly, it started with, so I went to Emory, I got my EMT license, and I also studied anthropology, but a degree that's a dual degree. It's anthropology and human biology, so that it would overlap with my pre-med stuff. And I was also getting my French degree at the same time because, if I'm already fluent in French, why not? Why not? And I knew my mom and I aren't the closest, so I knew that I wasn't going to talk to her as much as I did when I was under her roof. And so I just wanted to maintain my French. But the thing that I will say, which is why all of these encampments at Emory is so funny, but Emory gave me all of the tools for me to start deconstructing the worldview that I had been fed for my entire life, starting with things like in my French literature classes, we specifically would read, which I really appreciated about this French program, was that there are like a lot of French programs, because it's a French major, will just focus on French literature, as in from the country of France. But we know, given history, that is far from the only country that is what's called francophone, which is French speaking, because guess what? The French decided to colonize as many people as they could. And when they got there, they would force them to speak French, which means that a lot of these ex-colonies have incredible literature that is in French, that is specifically about their fight for liberation and their fight against the French government. And so in my French literature classes, I was reading all of those about colonialism and all of that bad stuff. And then in anthro, we were talking about things like evolutionary mismatch. And so that's the idea of like, maybe we were built because we became Homo sapiens in a completely different world than we are now, that our adaptive traits, like being able to quickly notice if there's something coming at us, is maladaptive in a world where we're surrounded by advertisements constantly. So they distract us and they pull our attention away. And so talking about things like that, evolutionary mismatch and all of that, kind of led me to the politics. And that was, I think I was going to get there eventually, just given my nature. My superlative in high school was most likely to start her own podcast to argue with everyone, including the sound man. Which is funny because I don't have a podcast, but anyway, and I do all my own sounds, so I argue with myself. But so I started with that, with the politics. And then I hadn't drawn in years because when I was pre-med, I didn't have time to draw. And so I started making political art, and people from that political art were like, hey, I really like your political art, which means that I would probably like your political opinions. Could you make a video talking about blank? And at the time I was an EMT and I was spending all of my shifts talking to the people on the ambulance about politics anyway. So I was like, you know what? What if I just explain what I'm already explaining on the ambulance, but just in front of a camera? What if I just do that? And especially with everything that I was seeing as an EMT of just the health disparities that are currently here in the United States, not that will happen under whomever, but that are here and have been here for decades. I think that all of that just kind of made me feel like it's either that I get an audience, which is great if I do. And if I don't, I'm screaming into the void and that's cathartic. So either which way, I'm getting something out of it. And if it helps people understand my point of view and helps hopefully shift the Overton window, then so be it. But really, first and foremost, it was my political art. And then I was like, I can't stay quiet. Like I really struggled to be quiet. And it felt like that was the next inevitable step.
Yeah. This is it's you're the type of person that's like this if you just are that it's great. Like you're talking to people in the ambulance, you got a captive audience. It's great. Their asses ain't going anywhere.
They can't go anywhere.
It's great. It's like, oh, this is amazing. It's what I've been waiting for. But there's a lot of people like that. However, like if that happens, to me, and I can tell, all right, the person's actually interested in what I have to say. And if I did it all the time and no one gave a fuck and they're like annoyed by it, I would have never done this. But the fact that whenever I do this, people tend to listen, even people who disagree, that's when I think that's when it's like, okay, this could actually do something. That's probably how you felt too.
Yeah, no, it was definitely that. I would talk to people where I would leave the ambulance after our 12-hour shifts and I would leave like, oh my God, if I ever see their name on the schedule ever again, I am dodging them like the plague. I cannot sit through another 12 hours with this person. They were saying just flat out racist things. They were talking crap about their patients. And like, of course, I would report them when there was something official to report. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately in Georgia, like I can't report everyone who is racist because otherwise like I can and I would. Yeah. But like they're not going to get kicked out, especially from the company that I was working at. It's just, you could really do a lot and get away with a lot, which I did not enjoy. And so I would leave those conversations like, oh my God. And I would run into them and they're like, hey, like, when are you working again? Like, I would love to continue those conversations. I started looking up into like what you were telling me and I'm like, wow, I'm blown away. And I was like, I really thought that we were not on the same page. But you left and did some research into what I was saying. Like, I must have hit a nerve.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it was just that's exactly how I felt of like, if I can talk to, for example, my dad, who it has taken me years to get him to the perspective that he is now at of, I may agree with everything that you say, but why do you have to call it communism? He's that type of person. And I love him to death. He has, again, so many great qualities, but politics, we just disagree. And if I can get someone who was born and raised in 46, was an adult during the 60s and 70s Cold War, experienced McCarthyism firsthand, and is a Vietnam vet, where not that he had to buy hook, line, and sinker why they were invading Vietnam, but he still mentally, to survive that experience, I think felt some sort of way towards the Vietnam War that other people who are not connected to it and who didn't have to experience it at all don't. And so I think about him and I'm like, you literally were fed every single reason to hate my ideology. You just were. And if I can get him to listen, not all the time, and I will say I mess up sometimes where I lose my calm and that does not help my argument sometimes. But like, I was like, if I can get him to understand, then I should be using this to at least, and that's what my first videos were, was let me tell you how I deal with talking to a far right person, how I deal with getting them to see my side as a communist without saying the word communism. And I realized that if I could get more people to do that, then hopefully we could shift these conversations in a direction that I wanted. And I knew that as a TA, I had gotten so many good reviews of like, you can explain concepts so well, which it was biology. And I think that that's one of my strengths. But like, if I can do that in front of a class of 15, I think I can record a silly little video on my phone.
Yeah. The bar's a lot lower. It's so true. It's so weird how similar our experiences are with this. Actually, it's not that weird at all when I think about it. But in the military, I found this happening all the time. Now, the military, there's a lot of hardcore conservatives in there, but it's not as conservative as people would guess. It really is.
It's not, because they prey on, who are they preying on? The people who feel the most discrimination of our current systems, which is, so they're going to understand. Yeah, no, I definitely get that. It's like, I'd say the military is about 60-40 Republican. It's not nearly as bad as people would guess, but there are some now the Republicans though are the worst type of Republicans, like the ones that trust me, there are some like straight up like open fascists like all the time in the military, especially you talk to special forces guys, my God. But anyway, not gonna get that later, but I would have conversations with people and just like toward the end of my career, and this is what, once again, I have a lot of people who are in the military who will talk to me about this. Like, how do I get in? The advice I give them with a grain of salt, because what worked for me won't work for everyone. Like, it just won't. It's just like, I can't tell you, but I would talk to like entire platoons and just give like lessons on Marxism and dialectical materialism and shit. And they would just be like edge of their seat, and they're just waiting to hear more and everything. Like the most right-wing guy like in the entire battalion, he'd be like, yeah, Whitehead, I can't say I disagree. I can't say I agree with what you're saying, but
I like how you think and how you're explaining it. And I was like, God damn, really? I was like, it worked. It never didn't work. It's not that I won them all over, but they all listened. And I was like, okay, well, God, why don't I just do this all the time? And I wanted to talk about, you mentioned your dad, and I'm trying, and like your dad, he was born at 46, you said, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's actually incredible whenever someone who was, because like we were raised with propaganda and they were raised with decades more. And like if I was born back then, I would still be rather conservative too, you know? And it's funny you talk about your dad and trying to slowly shift him over, because my dad is very similar. Now, my dad is not a conservative by any means, but he is a capitalist to the core. Like my dad is, and I don't really blame him. I mean, that's how he knew that's what you need to do to succeed, you know, being born into literal Jim Crow and everything like he was. And so when my dad got in the military, he started a small business, and like he scraped together some money. And I remember he rented like the shittiest building in the city. Like it was horrible. It was like, it was flooded. There was like 2 inches of water over it. And we had to, like one of the pipes had busted and we had to plug it. We had to drain the water. Of course, the carpet was garbage now. So we had to rip up the carpet and lay down new carpet, whitewash the walls and everything. By the way, I'm like 13 at the time. My brother and sister were even younger. So all the stories you hear with small business owners talk, yeah, we did it. Like, it's true. We did all that. But being raised by a small business owner, and I got to see firsthand the power that small business owners have over people. And it's like, oh, okay, I see it now. And it took years to kind of get around that. And so my dad and my mom now, they live in San Diego. So is my sister. And they've retired now and everything. And so slowly he's moving more to the left. I mean, there's only so far you can expect him to go. And my dad is a great man. I have a great relationship with him, like one of the kindest people that you'll ever meet. But every now and then something will come up, because I remember visiting him for Thanksgiving, and they moved into this new complex. San Diego is insanely expensive place to live, like insanely. And so, and I was at my parents' house too, and my God, like this, I felt like I was in Iron Man's house going to my parents' house. Like everything was a machine. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But it's a really, really nice neighborhood. And he's driving me around, showing me the houses and everything. And he says, yeah, so this area over here, they weren't single family homes. They were like they were apartments and everything. Mm-hmm. And he says, so tell me if I should feel bad about this. And he says, so, you know, these houses or these apartments are for low income families and people that want to come in. And so like they're partly subsidized and they can live in here and everything. But, you know, I don't know if it's fair that, you know, they can move into this really nice neighborhood and everything. And, you know, and because it brings down the property value of the houses that he just bought.
I was waiting for that shoe to drop.
Yes, exactly. And so then I was like, well, listen, Dad, I do get it that look, let's just be real. It does suck that you put all this money in the house and then you expect the value to go up and then it takes an immediate hit. And so it's not weird that you feel some resentment toward this. But I said, you got to look at the bigger picture here. Do you think poverty is a problem? He's like, oh, yeah, of course. I was like, so do you think the answer to it is to keep people economically segregated in perpetuity? Do you think that's going to solve it, or will it make it worse? He goes, yeah, I guess you put it that way. It does make a lot of sense. But once again, you're not trained to think like that. Like you were not trained to think like that at all.
I was honestly shocked by the beginning part of where he even had the self-awareness, just because no one, especially from older generations, were taught as much about self-awareness or reflection compared to us. And even more for, I think, me, just given how young I am. And I think that's for him to start it out of like, tell me if I should feel bad about this.
Yeah.
It's I love it when older people who I'm talking to start with that, or like, I know that this may sound bad. And I'm like, you're almost there. Your gut instinct is finally calibrated. But
it's great. Which is why that's why it's so important to have people that do this type of thing, who can, you know, I don't want to say eloquently, I don't want to say it that way, but properly, you know, lay out the reason. Effectively, yeah, there you go. There you go. Lay out.
It's not always eloquent. Sometimes it's a matter of like the biggest hit that I found in terms of my content, in terms of what I do, which it's not really something I do on purpose. It's just who I am. I am terrible. And I do think that it comes from a place where I haven't ever been put in a position, especially as a child, to learn this skill, because I was always just in the same tiny little school. I only had 70 people in my grade. It was comfortable enough to where I could just be myself-ish. But when I started growing up, I realized that I am someone who, when I speak up, I don't code switch. I cannot. I'm not capable of switching to professional talk. Just because I'm someone who curses a lot. I curse as a sailor. Like I like, and it worked really, really well when I was in EMT, because that's a situation where they kind of are a little more lenient about those things. Because, you know, if blood is hitting the wall, like, your professionalism is out.
Yeah,
it's out.
Yeah.
Like, we're just dealing with what's here, and we're just going to talk to each other like we're just regular people. And I think that that's why, like, it's not always, sometimes it is eloquent, like, especially if you're talking to the elitists. And I do think that I'm able to somewhat switch of, like, I can use more vocabulary that I learned in my classes, but the majority of the time that I structure my sentences, I've noticed, and I don't know if it's also if I'm bilingual, so I'm already dealing with the French in my head, so I don't know. I'm also just really bad at languages, but, like, I struggle so much to switch into that more formal speak. And I think that that does really good for the type of content that we make, because I think that we meet people where they're at rather than expecting them to listen to something that's half vocab words that they don't know. And not for any reason other than we don't get taught them. Like, it's not like I'm some sort of genius over here. It's just like, I just did the reading for this, so now I know about it. Like, that's it.
Yeah, I have a lot that actually goes into a question that I was going to ask about this, about leftist messaging and everything, how it works. But I want to stick on this for a little while, because I can't code switch either. Like, the way I talk now is how I talk all the time, but it seems to work. Like, it seems to work no matter where I am.
Yeah.
Like, professionally, I speak this way. And I think it's because I use a lot of humor, which is kind of universal. Like, no matter.
I think that that's, yeah.
Yeah, it works no matter what. And also, so the big word thing you brought up, this is something I talk about all the time. I do use, like, multisyllabic words very often, and I don't find it confuses people as long as you use it properly. You know, like, if we're going to use the word obsequious and someone doesn't know what it means, if you put it in the right way in the sentence, they can figure it out. Like, even a child can. Like, honestly, I talk to, like, third graders this way, and it seems to work. I don't know. I just like, but I've always been kind of good at flowing with that. And I wanted to bring up something. I won't mention this person's name, but this is something you discussed. There's a certain political YouTube character personality that we both like, and who may not be very popular with a lot of people that might see this. But
I know exactly who you're talking about.
I saw a video he did yesterday, and for the life of me, I can't remember what was about. I think it was about Biden and the Palestine thing, and the breakdown was fucking immaculate. I was like, Jesus Christ, he's still got, like, I don't watch him nearly as much as I used to, but I watched, it was like a 12-minute video. It's like, holy shit, that was incredible. It's so goddamn important. And he does not speak, he does switch very well for, like, professional speak, because a lot of leftist language is almost, I say, so necessarily academic. Like, there's only it kind of has to be that way. And so being able to broadcast that to a wide audience is a rare skill. Like, it's a talent that not everybody has. And so it's really important to be able to do that. And so, like you said, you do learn it as you go along at what seems to work and what doesn't.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that even, what was the word that you used? What does it mean?
Oh, obsequious. It's like being overly, kind to for a favor or something. Like, you do something wrong, yeah. And so, yeah, it's like missionaries. Like, they act in this, obsequious and ingratiating manner to try to get people to switch to their religion. Yeah, it's like, it's sucking up. And so, but if you just use it out of context, yeah, people may not know what it means. But if you use it in proper context, a literal child should be able to understand you. So that's how I kind of put it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that that's really interesting, because I think that one of the skills that I do have that transfers well to a lot of learning that I do, not math as much, which is funny given what I'm about to say, but given my ADHD and just given, I think, some of my strengths and weaknesses, I think that I am very good at pattern recognition, to where, like, I can roll with someone who is using that kind of vocabulary that I don't necessarily understand, because, like you said, if they're using it in a context, then I can fill in the blanks. And I think that that does give me an advantage when I'm talking to people who, like, I'm going to use my best friend here. She did debate in high school. She did policy debate. And so I don't know if you know much about that, but they talk, like, so fast, like so fast. You can't even understand what they're saying unless you're trained to listen to them. And she loves using big words. She loves big words. She's such a, like, she just loves reading, has always been a huge reader. So she learned these vocab words at a very young age compared to her peers. And so she feels very comfortable using them. I am someone who I had to go to special ed school in 3rd grade every Wednesday after school. I would have to go to the special ed school that's separate from my private school to try and relearn how to read because I was falling behind compared to my peers.
Wow.
And I think that that's such an interesting thing for me to experience as a kid, because I remember being in meetings where my private school, that's again very expensive, was telling my parents, like, we know that she's got 2 older sisters. Those 2 older sisters, one's not great at school, but the other one's really good. But like, she's falling behind. And they were like, maybe you should try putting her in a public school, which already is a whole conversation in itself of like, that. But my mom stood her ground and she was like, no, we'll take her somewhere else after school and she'll catch up. And I did. But I think that that's one of those things of, because of that, I know so many vocab words when it comes to anthropology, when it comes to things that I am interested in, that I have read about. I like, if I pull out any of my big books, like any of the big ones that I read, of like even Bowling Alone, which is just a thick book, you can see where I circle words and I say, and I write the definition next to it, and it's everywhere because I just don't have that much of a vocabulary in terms of like, unless it's specifically biology related or anthropology related or like dialectical materialism related, like loquacious. It's a word that I love using because I finally learned what it means. And also it really applies to me. So I was like, I've got it, loquacious. That word, it took me Googling it, at least because it came up in Gilmore Girls. There's specifically a scene where the grandfather mentions it. And I kid you not, I have watched Gilmore Girls 14 times. Every single time up until like the last 2, I had to Google loquacious and be like, what does it mean again? And so I'm not really quick to learn words unless it is specifically in the context that I really engage in, which is biology, anthro, and politics. But I do think that that's also an important thing of pattern recognition, of if you can roll with different people who are speaking at different levels, regardless of where you're at. I think that that is a really important skill of just being able to fill in the blanks and continue the conversation. Not that you shouldn't say like what I just did, of like, what does that word mean? You should definitely feel comfortable doing that. But also to be able to at least build up your counterpoint, even with that you're not really sure what they're saying. And I think that that definitely served me well. And I think that going to special ed school helped. It also humbled me pretty fast.
Well, I was just thinking about your mom, the indignity. Your mom was like, I was like, we're going to put your daughter in special ed classes. All right. We made her send her to a public school, and I just imagine sacre bleu.
Yeah, no, she would not have it. She already hates American school systems and was barely like accepting the private school education that we were getting. So like, no, especially not in Georgia.
That's funny. Oh yeah, I can see that. So the thing with words, so I've always been really good with like vocab. That's like, I sucked at math too. Like, I wish my dad is like a genius at math, and I'm terrible. I did not get that. But so it was the classic. I'd get home from school, and my dad would be like, if Johnny has 3 apples, the parents' example, whatever. That was my dad. He was a horrible math teacher, but
geniuses tend to not make great teachers.
So present company excluded. But there's gonna be. But I remember so my dad has he couldn't talk till he was like 3 or something years old, and so he has a speech impediment. It's hard to understand what he's saying, especially if you don't know him. Like, it's not hard for me to understand. I guess at times it might be, but like he has a hard time saying R's, and just like a lot of letters, he has a hard. And so most people, when they hear my dad talk, they assume it's just a really thick Georgia accent, which is kind of true, but it's also, he has a very difficult time speaking. So I picked up at a very early age that 2 things. One, that the way you speak doesn't necessarily reflect how intelligent you are. 2, it doesn't matter. People are going to assume you're not bright just based on how you speak. So it was really important to me to speak as clearly as possible and proficiently as possible. And I forgot I was going with this.
Wait, can I say something really fast?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that that's so interesting that you brought that up, because as someone who's raised in the South, I picked up on that so fast of if someone had a thick Southern accent, they were automatically, regardless of anything else, of how they were dressed, where they were even talking, if they had, unless it was old money Georgia accent, because that's a different accent. I will admit you can pick that up pretty easily of like,
it's almost British. Like,
yeah, you're old money Georgia. Like, that's different. But regular Georgia country accents, I would hear people around me, or especially if they were coming from like Alabama or whatever, and they would get treated so differently to where I learned as a kid raised in Atlanta. I was raised around so many people with Southern accents to where if I'm surrounded by people who speak in Southern accents, I will slip back into it. I will slowly but surely start sounding exactly like them, because that's just where I was raised. But when people hear me talk, they don't think that I'm from Georgia because I don't have the accent, to the point though that when I was little, I refused to use y'all. I refused. I was like, I'm not going to be associated with these Southerners, because I was falling into the same elitism that I was getting propagandized to, of like, if you want to be taken seriously, do not sound Southern. Do not have an accent. Try your best. And I could see it with my mom also, who has a French accent. And like, I could see all of those moments to where I remember so clearly that I would want to say y'all because it's the natural, it's a really good word. And I would stop myself and be like, you all. And finally, when I was old enough, I was like, why am I doing this? Y'all is one of the best words that and now I say y'all all the time, to the point where I get made fun of sometimes because they're like, you said y'all 3 different times in 3 sentences back to back. And I'm like, well, did you get the point? Like, it made sense.
Yeah. This is what's the point of language here? Is the communicated concept. Did you understand it? We're good. Yeah. It's oh God, I spent 30 minutes talking about that very thing, because to this day I don't say y'all. I don't. It's just because I was little and I did the same thing. It's like I wanted to speak at a higher level of English, and then I realized that the higher levels are bullshit. It's all, socially constructed, and like the rich people decide what good English is. And so, but I mean, my die was cast. There's every now and again I will show the indelible stamp of my Southern origin, and I'll say stuff like I don't say aunt or aunt. I say auntie. I still say that. And
that's a classic.
Yeah, right. I still call shopping carts buggies. So like every now and again, I'll say something that gives it away. But for the most part, you don't know. One I got rid of because of its sexist connotation. It's just how, the Southern, like, I would call women dear all the time. That's like something I grew. So I've dropped that over the years, but so there's very few left. But I want to talk about what I read. Oh, you mentioned your mom with the French accent and everything. What blows Americans' minds, because we don't think about it much, like if you travel a lot around the country, I was speaking to someone yesterday about how English is essentially the lingua franca of planet Earth. So no matter where you go, you speak English, you're fine. Like, you don't actually have to learn anyone else's language. Like, when you go to the airports, everything is written in the native tongue and in English. You can get around just fine. But British accents, it's funny that you mentioned like old money South. The accent is slightly different. Actually, see, it's radically different. They sound very, And I always thought it was funny that it kind of sounds, you can tell the British evolution, and it's very close to British accent. And British accents are seen as fancy, but to Americans, any British accent is seen as fancy. But in Britain, there's like 9 different accents, and there is a hierarchy, but we couldn't tell because we don't know them. That's pretty funny. And then I actually never thought about it in French. I'm sure it's in every language. There's probably some in French too. But what I was going to mention about my dad was, he was always trying to improve his vocabulary, because he went to a segregated school in the 60s, and he was not a very good student. So, he was always trying.
Power. Like, language is power, so that makes sense.
And back when I was in high school, we were listening to the radio all the time, and there was this set of CDs you could order, and it was called Verbal Advantage. And basically what it was a vocabulary list. It gave you like all these, 5-syllable, 6-syllable words, and gave you the definition and how to use it. And I remember my dad ordering it, and I was such a cocky asshole as a teenager. But my dad would be like, "Hey, Tia, listen." I was like, "Dad, I know all those words. I'm good." I'm good. You have fun with it. And every now and again, because the CDs would come like every month or something, and he'd spring a word on me. It's like, "All right, what does this word mean?" I knew it, of course. And then one day he came up, he goes, "TJ, onus." I was like, "Onus?" He goes, "ONUS." And I was like, "That's not a word." He goes, "Yeah, it is." And I was like, "What?" And then he taught me onus is like the responsibility. It rests on your side. And I was like, all right, Dad, like there's some words out there that just, yeah, sure, they're words, but no one ever uses them. I swear to Christ, like every month after that, I heard the word onus.
I was going to say, that's really, that out of all the ones that you have even used in this, that's the one that I'm like, I know it.
It's wait, but 16-year-old TJ thought he had the whole dictionary memorized. And so when I figured if I didn't know a word, nobody knew it. And so that was a pretty humbling experience. I know, right? Yeah. It's yeah, this is pretty good stuff right there. And okay. Man, I want to talk about the evolutionary capture, but we're not gonna have time to do that. All right. So question I wanted to ask. All right. What we're kind of fits in what we're talking about now. What can we do to better improve our messaging? Because we've talked about basically how to structure arguments or whatever, or how to structure the language and everything. But the arguments themselves, like how good or bad of a job do you think we're all doing as a collective with this?
I think that it's a mixed bag, typical with the left. There are some people who do it great, and there are some people who don't do it great. I think that the thing that we're struggling with right now the most is that too many people look at all the different strategies that are being employed and think there is one that is better than all of them. And it's not to say that I don't think that there are some that are significantly worse than all of them, because that I do think is 100% true. Like one of the ones that I personally despise is I will use it when I'm talking to someone in person, because in person, it's real time. I do not want to do what's that word? Talking about words.
Yeah.
The one where when you're arguing with someone, it has the opposite effect. It actually pushes them further away. I can't remember. It's like
productive is what I'm thinking of, but
it's something like that. But it's a specific thing that happens when two people have disagreements and they try to come together in a conversation. They actually leave, ending up being more polarized than when they first came. And so when I try to do that, the thing that I disagree with, like the strategy that I disagree with the most, is that in person, I understand because of that fact, not using your personal political labels as a starting point. Because if I start the conversation, if I started on the ambulance talking to people and I was like, hi, my name is X and I am a communist. I'm actually, I kind of lean on like the Marxist, but also Marxist-Leninist side sometimes. And I really think that we need to abolish the state as well as the family. And I think that we should defund the police. If I started with all that, they're not listening to a single word that is coming out of my mouth for the rest of shift. They have put me in their box of this is a loony person that I don't want to deal with. And so I understand not using those labels in those specific situations where you think that, especially with people who you have multiple contacts with, where over time you can slowly like plant seeds, don't drop bombs, like if you can plant seeds, that's going to go a lot further than I think that dropping bombs. But specifically, oh boy, does it bother me, is when someone, you can tell they are talking to a general audience and they describe communism, anarchism, anti-capitalism to a T. But then they leave out the last little nail in the coffin at the end of naming it. Then you have not successfully subverted their expectations, because they leave thinking, okay, well, I agree with that. But if I see that communism and anarchism or anti-capitalism, like, no. You have to know when to drop it. Like that is a specific skill that I think comes with doing it more and more often. But that is the one that bothers me the most, is when people just refuse to even address, like they're like, I'm just a leftist. And I'm like, no, be honest. Like you can, especially if you're talking to me, like, don't tell me that you're just a leftist. Like, tell me like, okay, I lean more towards progressive liberal, but I'm kind of scooting towards socialist, or I'm scooting towards soc dem. Like, tell me those things. Because it's going to get us further, because that specific language, back to what we were talking about, that specific language is important. Using that vocabulary when it specifically is pertinent to what you are saying, and it perfectly describes, like when I'm describing my political views. And if I don't say that I'm anti-capitalist, like at the very least, I'm doing myself a disservice, and I'm also doing the movement a disservice. So I think that that's one of those things where I'm just like, a lot of people like my dad are like, just call it something new. And I'm like, no, then we're just ignoring all of the propaganda and hoping for the best that people don't put two and two together, that we're actually talking about anti-capitalism, communism. And that just doesn't feel like a good way to build a trusting, educational, reciprocal relationship with someone, by misleading them repeatedly on purpose with no end in sight of telling them the complete full picture thing. So that's one of those things that I'm upset about. The other thing that I think with the left in terms of specifically messaging that gets to me is I mean, obviously, infighting, like y'all.
Oh, geez, we love it, don't we, folks? So
we love it. It's what we do best. And that is the one that I'm like, and one of my recent videos that's doing numbers right now, and I don't know if you saw it, the one of I'm sitting on the bed and it's I'm not voting for Joe Biden because he supports genocide, and then the other version of me is like, well, yes,
oh, yeah.
I like, yeah, that video. That video is doing numbers, and a lot of people are saying if you go through the comments, they hate either side of me. Like, and they're both represented by me, which is always funny. But they're like, I really hate the one in the yellow shirt. And I'm like, okay, I also hold those opinions. But I think that that's one of those things of, at the end of that video, I specifically make a point of, regardless of where we differ in terms of the political strategy of voting for Joe Biden or voting for a third party, regardless of that, we need to be on the same page about organizing. We need to be on the same page of the direct action. We need to be in lockstep of defending these encampments, saying that they are justified. We need to be in lockstep in saying that we can't just expect this to stop. We have to actually take direct action. We need to be, every single one needs to be supporting the solidarity funds. Those are the ones where I'm like, we cannot have infighting about it. We can't. We cannot. We need to drop it, because that is the one where we need to be together for. Like, a united front is best. Now, if internally we want to have disagreements of like, I think that Marxist-Leninism has some really good things. I also think that it has some things that it's done in the past where, when implemented, I didn't agree with the steps that they took. Like, my biggest one is, I'm definitely going to get in trouble for this one, but like, I don't like agrarian. I can always read it. Agrarian. See? Words. Hard. Socialism. The one that starts with agriculture. The one that starts with nationalizing food. That, to me, is not that I'm against having a nationalized food supply. It's just that I don't think that that should come first. For me personally, I think that we know how to do it better with healthcare. Start with nationalizing healthcare. That's one of my criticisms of Marxist-Leninism when it has been implemented in the past. However, also in the past, we had a different time period. They were switching from feudalist societies that were more focused on agriculture than having healthcare. So I'm also going to mention that. But like, we can have those disagreements, but we cannot have those disagreements facing forward. And facing outward. We can have those internal disagreements, but when it comes to being a united front in terms of ideology, we need to all be on the same page of, like, at the very least, capitalism bad. At the very least, war bad. Profiting off of basic necessities bad. Like, we need to have those. And I think that too many people focus on the parts where we disagree without highlighting where we all agree, and that could build solidarity and momentum. And that's my biggest issue, I think. Sorry that was a long-winded answer.
No, I liked all of that. Well, my first thought is, I think you should start a secondary account for Yellow Shirt Leah, and just have her just like straight up like MSNBC talking points or some shit. It's just like, that would be so funny. Like, that would be just having an alter ego for people to hate on or love.
Then they find both of them. They're just so confused. Are they twins?
Like, I have no idea who she is. Like, I have no idea. It would be. I like the comedy elements. And it's also really funny. The leftist infighting is incredibly annoying to me too. And part of me does get it, because, as we mentioned earlier, when you sign up for this ball club, you realize you're gonna have a losing record. Like, you get it. You're gonna get your ass kicked all the time, and you will until you die. If you get 10% of what you want, that's a great job. A good game. So we look for wins wherever we can get it, and so we will find us like, aha, this leftist thinks this, and another one thinks this. Let's go to town. I can get a win here. Like, I really think that's what it comes down to, because the shit that they argue about sometimes, like, you're talking about something that is 100 years in the future at best, or something like a lot of.
Or the one that gets me, or when they're arguing and they're screaming at each other over things that happened 100 years ago, and I'm like,
oh my god, I have that written down. I have this written down, that it's very funny that leftists are adhering to something that happened 200 years ago. So what is wrong with you?
Holding on to grudges that happened that were not. The people that had the original grudges are dead and gone.
Yes.
And you are continuing their grudges. Like,
it's weird. It's so weird. It's oddly like religious to an extent. Like, it really feels that way a lot of times. Like, it's really annoying. And what you mentioned first, I think, is super important. A video I did a long time ago, right when I first started, like 2 years ago, I was talking about how exactly what you mentioned, about how what I like to do is, I hate to call it deceit, but it's like lull people into this feeling is like, oh, okay, this is a good person. This is a smart person. This is someone who's responsible, someone I can trust, someone who knows what they're talking about. And then 6 months later, drop the C-bomb on them. That it fucks with their brain, because like they've been taught their entire lives that, you know, communists, socialists, leftists in general are lazy. They're stupid. They haven't studied econ 101.
They just want everything for free. And I'm like, I'm literally out here getting a medical degree. Like, I don't.
Oh yeah, this is something that in a weird way, like growing up with a Protestant work ethic that I still have, you know, pays off in a lot of ways. Like, I'm the hardest worker here and you all know it, and I'm a communist. What does that tell you? Like, they can't use it on you. They can't. And I'm not recommending everyone try to be the hardest worker, because it kind of fucks you over. But it's
especially if you have health problems, it's not worth it. They don't care about you.
Exactly. But I was going to ask, like, that's going to be that's difficult to do in your situation in which you're making content. People are going to run across you for the first time, and a lot of them are going to run across you saying the communists for the first time. All right, how do you handle that? Like, because like that, if that's going to turn people up, I mean, I guess it's just the occupational hazard. You really can't get around it.
I decided pretty early on when I was gonna make my content that I wouldn't approach it the same way that I approach real life interactions, because I think that in real life, you just can't deny that I have worked hard to get where I am. Like, you can't. I've done enough school. I worked as an EMT. I've worked as a preschool teacher. Like, regardless of my very privileged background, there are things that you can't take away from me, such as like me getting into med school. And if you're an elitist, that tends to mean something, which I would just like to put on record that med school acceptances are rigged from the start, not in the sense that they are like actually cheap behind the scenes, but just the amount of financial gatekeeping for the medical field of like being able to afford MCAT tutoring, which like I got my books used, but like someone who struggles with multiple choice tests needs MCAT studying, and that's only left for the rich people. So like already that elitism, just reminding everyone, is bogus. However, in person, it's a lot harder to make those classist and the classist, that was a Freudian slip, and classic anti-communist arguments of like, you're lazy, you just want things for free, because if you meet me in person, it's just so antithetical to who I am and how I engage with things. Like, everyone always tells me, like, you never stop, like, just sit down, do not pick up. Like, I mean, even today I have to finish my master's and I'm over here like, so like, this is what I can't believe you're doing that. Honestly, I budgeted like 2 hours. I'm good. Yeah, so like you can't deny that when meeting me. But when I made my content, I knew that I didn't want to have to tiptoe around being a communist. And I will admit that at first, that's why like in my Instagram handle was based on my Twitter handle, and my Twitter handle came first. My Twitter handle, that's why I put Socialistsloots, because at the time I felt most comfortable with the socialist label. And now when I made my TikTok, I was like, I'll stick with Petite Leah, because I was like, to hint at people that I'm French. No one gets it, which I think is the funniest thing.
Amazing.
When I start speaking French, they're like, and I'm like, it's literally there in the name, but okay. But I decided that in order for me to make the in-depth content that I wanted, and that was going to be a regular occurrence, that I just had to bite the bullet figuratively of like, people are just gonna assume that. And I do have some videos where even with that, you'll notice, and like if you ever try to like analyze my videos, which I don't know why anyone would, but if you do, there are a lot of videos where I know if I'm gonna say something that is, there are sometimes where I just do it to rage bait, and I will admit that, where I'm just like, I know that this is gonna piss you all off. And sometimes I do that without realizing how it has the potential to get into crowds that I know will like vehemently disagree with it. I'm just kind of like having fun within my community, and then gets out and I'm like, ugh. But you'll notice that on videos like the one where I'm like, everyone can't be a businessman, that went viral or whatever. If I make those arguments of everyone can't be a businessman, you can bet that in that same video, I'm going to mention some of my credentials of like, she's not just the regular, like the stereotypical blue haired, she's a college kid, like she doesn't actually work. Like I will mention that I have been an EMT. I will mention that I have been a preschool teacher. I only stopped working for those jobs because of my chronic illness. Like I will make those, even though I don't think that they need to be justified, but to try and curb some of that reaction I know I'm going to get. But I'll admit that like I can tell, and sometimes I regret that I did it, because I can tell that like, I would have gotten you if you didn't know me.
Yeah.
But then I think about it, I'm like, for a lot of those people, and I've had so many sweet comments like this, which I think also have kept me going, of people DMing me and being like, I first came across your page when I just completely hated everything that you were and everything that you are. And I thought that these were the stupidest arguments that I've ever heard. This is now 6 months later, and I actually agree with you on everything. And having enough of those comments made me realize that even if they hear the C word, hopefully I planted enough seeds before their brain shut off with that they will take them with them. That is my goal, is not necessarily change them in that moment, but to at the very least, just plant a seed. So
those comments make it all worth it. They really make it all worth it. I mean, and especially when you think about, so on social media, you have people who, the biggest group is just the people who watch. And then you have the people who watch and comment, and that's a smaller group. And then, or watch and like as a smaller group. And then watch and comment is even smaller. And then watch and make it is the smallest. But the fact that he's like, all these people watched it, and I had one person reach out and say, hey, this really changed. There's probably like a dozen more that didn't say a word. Like, for example, like the content creator we were talking about earlier, I really haven't watched this guy for like 10 years. I don't think I've liked a single video. Like, I don't think I've actually like clicked like on one.
It took me years to finally like even subscribe.
Yes, I so out there.
Now that I'm a content creator, though, I will say, and I wonder if you've changed your opinion. Now that I'm a content creator, if I hear one of my friends and they're like, I've been watching this, my best friend does this, or she's been watching this content creator on YouTube for, I kid you not, 7 years or something, and she has still not subscribed. I forced her to sit her little.
What the fuck?
You're subscribing right now. Right now. And like now that I'm a content creator, and that's literally for him, that's what made me switch to subscribing, was that I started making my own videos, and I was like, you're right. It doesn't cost me anything. Bye.
He does say that. That's good. That's good. No, it is funny how you think about that. You're like, oh man, like this takes $0. It's like no energy at all.
Max.
Yeah, I like it anyway. I don't know. It's weird to think about that. It's true. But fuck, that was so funny. That was a good point. But God, TJ, a professional wouldn't. Oh, I was gonna mention the credentialism and getting into med school and everything. So my brother, you mentioned your friend was a PA or starting to be a PA. My brother went to PA school, and he started taking ADHD meds while he was in PA school because he was having a really hard time keeping up. And then he told me he started taking the medication, and it became way easier for him. Yeah. But the testing and everything in these medical fields, and I saw something the other day that a lot of states are dropping the bar exam because it's an unnecessary, it doesn't predict how good of a lawyer you're going to be. It's like they've looked over the data and everything, and it's like, oh yeah, like you get into school, you finish it. This is just an arbitrary block to, stop more people from becoming, lawyers. And this is something I bring up with Cuba, and that Cuba has an excellent medical program, and the doctors in Cuba are fantastic, like around the world, like they're recognized. And I was like, yeah, because it doesn't cost a lot to go to medical school in Cuba. We are just stopping a lot of brilliant people from getting the medical field because it costs so much. Why are we hurting our medical field this way?
And I think that I even think about it. I think that my personal lived experience heavily influences this because my older sister, my parents, both physicians, but they never wanted us to be physicians, to the point where my mom, to this day, as I am accepted into medical school, will still bring up engineering. I do not have a degree in engineering. I will never have a degree in engineering. I suck at math and physics, but she's still like, please. Because they just really hated specifically the medical field in the United States. And that's fair, as someone who was raised by them and never really saw them because they were both always working or on call. Like, yeah, it did definitely have an impact on the life that they lived. But unfortunately, I still want to do it. But I think about that so much of like, even with content creating, part of the reason why I was even able to do it is because of the financial safety net that my parents provided me when I lost my job due to health concerns. That had nothing to do with like, before I lost my job, I could have eventually, like, I was making enough, still not great. It was $14.50, but they did have stipends. So like if I worked a whole bunch of shifts that week, like I could make enough to slowly start having savings. But then I lost everything because of something that's completely out of my control. I had high blood pressure, among other things. And they were like, you can't be on the ambulance. And I think about that all the time of like, if it hadn't been for my wealthier parents, I could have never made any videos because I wouldn't have had the time. I would have just had to pick up whatever job I could have found, not cared about my health at all, and just kept on beating my body up to try and make ends meet. And the only reason why even now I have been able to still, because I'm still currently unemployed, I am doing my master's, but it's a hybrid program, and I did do art commissions. See, even then I'm like trying to justify it, but like I'm unemployed. And the reason, and like, and it has nothing to do with me. If you know me personally, you know that I really don't like it, and that I really don't like being financially dependent on my parents, especially given our tough relationship in the past. But without their support, I could have never made content. I could have never even had the time to honestly start my art stuff. I could have never gotten my EMT license the way that I did in college, because that was a volunteer program. The only reason why I could do it was because I had their financial support to not have to work an extra job, to where I could spend time as if I were working a job for free, which looks really good for med schools. But like, that's because my parents gave me enough money to survive. To anyone else who doesn't have enough money to survive, that volunteer gig becomes astronomically more difficult, because you have to make the choice. And on top of that, med schools look down on people who work in the healthcare field, like if they're in their applications, because you have to have a certain amount of hours of like seeing healthcare. It's pretty vague in terms of how much or what counts. Like you can just be at the reception and it still counts. But they will look down on people who do it paid versus unpaid, because they prefer people who volunteer. That is such a way of financially gatekeeping literally anyone who doesn't have privileged parents. Same thing with tutoring, same thing with like being able to not work and then being able to do your homework after class. Like all of those things are so financially gatekept, and not in a way that most people think about it. Most people just think about, can you take 200K of debt on? And that is a question, but like that's the end. That is after you have gone through all of the other financial gates to get to that point. And I think that that's my biggest issue, is like, I even think about this content stuff of like, a lot of people ask me like, how are you able to make all these videos? And like, I will admit, I did record when I was still working as an EMT. And then I very quickly lost my job. But like, that's part of the reason why I'm able to do all of this, is because I have that privileged background. And to anyone who doesn't, it's just not fair. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't have to be, who were you born to and where? It should just be, I'm interested in this and I would like to go study this. And this will help society because you need people who are interested in this. Like, that's literally it.
It's incredibly frustrating when more people don't realize how much of success can be attributed to just dumb fucking luck. Just like nothing to do.
And not even just the dumb luck of you, the dumb luck of who you were born to.
Oh yeah, like, absolutely.
And their health and your genetic health being random. Like, just,
people think that if they were born into, a lower financial status, and
they could do it all the same.
Yeah, they do it. They'd be fine. And even if they had like different brain chemistry, no, I'd figure it out. No, you wouldn't. I guess that's not how the shit works.
Wouldn't. And that's, I think, one of the things that radicalized me the most is I explicitly, fundamentally, to my core, believe that if I had been put in any other situation with a family that did not have the financial means that I had, I would not be where I am today. I mean, the special ed school, that wasn't free. Like, all of these things that made me get to where I am today are explicitly the outcome of who I was born to and what resources they were willing to put into me. Yes. And that's just not how the world should work. It should not be dependent on that at all.
It's not.
And it really...
And what I like that we're bringing attention to, like, it is a problem that, we're gatekeeping things like, law school and med school. But the real issue, we're stopping more content creators. We need to have more people create. We really do need more. Unironically, we do. But so I wanted to get into, the main topic, supposedly, that we had for this conversation is what's going on with kids these days, these college campuses? Don't they realize the importance of this settler colonial project we've been going at for 8 decades now? They just, how can we get through to them?
They're so naive.
I don't understand. Like, what's happened that's made them turn against this obviously justified and moral action we've been trying to do?
who could have seen it coming? It's not like students have ever gotten mad at these things before in the past.
Not known for it. No.
Yeah, I think that especially with the recent stuff, that is one of the big reminders of like the kids are all right. And that's one of those things of like, I'm happy to see the amount of agreement that we're all having. And I'm happy to see the united front on the left of like, we are all being like, no, this is right. Like they should be able to do this. They're paying tuition. Their tuition is then being used to fund a genocide in another country that we have been financially uplifting for 80 years. Like that is no. And I think that is good. And I'm happy that we're seeing the united front. With that said, I do wish that more people would highlight specifically schools that aren't as someone who has attended, who is currently attending an Ivy and will be going to an Ivy for med school. As much as it's great that the Ivies are a part of this and that Columbia started this. And I love that specifically at Ivies as someone who attends one. Again, you do not get here oftentimes, the majority of us, via not being privileged. In order to afford an Ivy, in order to be able to even apply, like it costs money, it takes time. So I'm happy that those students and students that I personally know are putting their privilege on the line and using it to stop this war machine. That is 10 out of 10. However, we know just based on history that those are some of the safest students to be doing those things, because they are on safer campuses that won't automatically, just like UT, be under public. And so then the governor can just be like, actually, let's rain down cops on them. And that's not a universal rule. Emory being a private, very elitist school in Atlanta, still called cops. But when you're looking at the actions of these kids, I just wish that we would highlight places like Cal Poly Humboldt. That one, their encampment has been going strong. They are not giving up. They have occupied a building for days now. They have created reinforcements to protect themselves from the riot cops. Like they are escalating it in a way and in a direction that I think is important, because otherwise, if you're just doing it on the green and you have permission to do it, is that really a protest? And so I think that we need to highlight those students that are more from just regular working class backgrounds, not saying that there aren't those at Ivies, like there definitely are, it's just fewer of them. But we need to highlight them because those are the groups that are most likely to get cracked down on and cracked down violently on, and face those serious repercussions for life, such as like, if you're at an Ivy and you get, suspended or whatever, you probably have a social safety net similar to mine, to where your parents can help you with the bail. They can help you with like, if you lose access to that school or whatever, like you have more support than people who don't have the financial means to support you. And I think that then therefore we as a community need to have those students' backs. Like we need to be supporting those bail funds. We need to be doing everything in our power to protect them, to highlight them and to thank them, but also to do our best to give them credit where credit's due.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's well, before I go no further, I want to apologize not only to you, but to our audience, because I forgot to mention that Leah is an Ivy. And this entire time, I have not once referred to her as Your Grace, Your Eminence, Your Excellency. I'm not sure exactly what title is supposed to go with that. So please forgive my my departure from protocol. Liege.
Liege. That's the one.
That's the one. And so, that is a great point that I hadn't even thought of, because, God, that UT footage was awful. Just watching that, it was like, it seemed like something from a different era. Like, this shouldn't belong here. Like, colleges shouldn't have cops body slamming photographers and shit. And that's such a great point about how, like, just the school that they're going to allows a lot more freedom to do something like that. Because, chances are, if you're at fucking Rutgers or something like that and you get arrested, your parents can afford bail. Or if you miss too much class and you get dropped, you have another good school you can go to. You go to, local city community college, you get arrested, your entire life could be over. Like, it could be done. Yeah. Like, it could ruin everything. Yeah. So that is a very great point. I'm glad you brought that up. And what I don't understand is, I guess this is like more collective than just like, the college protests and everything. Well, actually, so you mentioned like people on the left, like we're all pretty unified on this. I have been happy to see it spreading from there, because like just support for the Zionist project has just been standard for most Americans. Like for most of my life, that's where I was, because that's where I was told to be. And a lot of it is like the propaganda. It's like with a lot of other things. The propaganda doesn't work anymore. I'm going to show a video real quick here. Now, this, I don't know if you've seen this, but I'll share it and try to get your reaction. That I think this is an example of why the sentiment is growing, because Israel's messaging is just like, it's indefensible. And what I'm gonna show here is a video about the mass graves that they discovered in Gaza, from the hospitals. That are like around 300 bodies, a lot of them tied up and obviously executed. And this is from an Israeli politician.
And this is the second one.
Yeah.
Second mass grave. Just for everyone listening, like second one, 300 bodies by a hospital.
And the interview was with a Israeli politician. She's the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. Her name is Fleur Hassan Nahum, and she's asked like what her thoughts are about this. So at least I can add this to the stage. Okay.
Three corpses found in a mass grave at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The UN Human Rights Chief has said he is absolutely horrified. Who do you think those bodies are?
Probably terrorists, because the ratio of combatant to innocent that Israel has is unprecedented in modern warfare. We know we've killed about...
I want to pause right there. I bet it is unprecedented, that ratio. Probably not the way you're suggesting, but I bet that is true. It's probably the only true thing she's going to say right here. Let's go.
15,000 terrorists. There was a terrible battle in those areas. So the chances are...
How do you think these people died?
In gun battles with Israel.
Why do you think some of the bodies were found with ties around their hands?
Well, because we probably arrested the terrorists.
And then killed them.
Well, I don't know if the terrorists fought back. I wasn't there. But all I can tell you is that this has been a very difficult urban warfare, that nobody on earth has experienced this type of warfare, where the terrorists are hiding in tunnels, where they're...
Just there's about a minute left, Leah. So if you want to say something, you raise your hand. I'll pause it so you can add something in there. But
cowards, because they won't face their enemy.
Okay.
They just leave innocent people up there whilst they hide in tunnels that are bigger than the London underground. And they come out, they shoot, and it could be that many of them were shot and they were shooting in a battle. And it could be that there were bombs thrown by them and grenades. There could be a million different scenarios of why these were found. But remember, we're in the middle of a war.
I just to clarify for me, if you would, how do they fight back with their hands tied behind their backs?
Well, we don't know what they were doing before their hands were tied behind their backs, do we?
No, but if you've managed to cable tie them, they shouldn't, shouldn't subsequently find them dead, should we?
And maybe, again, we're just conjecturing. Maybe his friend threw a grenade, and then what happens? Maybe there was a missile. Maybe they threw a rocket, and then what happens? Again, this is conjecture. I wasn't there. You weren't there. We can't know. All I know is that our army has the highest...
Neither was Amnesty International, and they say there's at least 2...
All right. So I don't know about you, but that was about as bulletproof a defense as I have ever seen. How could you possibly question such amazing logic? Like, yeah, sure, he died, but maybe he threw a missile. Maybe that happened.
Sure, he had both of his hands tied behind his back. But have you considered him having a gun and shooting with both of his hands tied behind his back? Have you considered that?
It's just like, I wish you guys could have seen Leah's reaction while this was going on. She was like having a seizure down there. It's like, but this is what I'm saying is like, it's so bad.
I'm so sorry, but you also just cut her before she was going to say, we have the most high moral standards of any army. Are you? I just. It is exactly what you're saying. Like their mask is not even slipping off. It has fallen to the ground and they can't find it.
It's it's like they're not even trying to wear it. It's like, yeah.
They're like, that's conjecture, actually.
Yeah, right. It's neither of us were there. We don't know what happened, but I am damn sure what happened. Either way, and it's the least plausible explanation that I can come up with, and it's like, this is what I point to is like, listen, I understand. I get it. I actually do. That a lot of people still think that, what the IDF is doing is this noble project to, defend that, because that's what they've been taught as their kids. I get it. However, you see something like that, fuck you. You still are defending this after that shit. Like that's, by the way, this is a government official. This isn't like some man on the street interview they found with someone who was unsuspecting it. She went on it was like a Sky News in Britain, like a national broadcast to defend this. And that's the best she could come up with. Like the best she could come up with. It's like,
and they keep on doing it over and over and over again. Like, they go on all these channels, they say the same things, and I'm like, it's not hitting like you think it is because you sound absurd. You sound like to any, and this is a classic back to that YouTuber that we're not going to name, but like he always says, like, that is to even the normies.
Mm-hmm.
Their little antenna is going to go up and be like, wait, what did you just say? Like, I thought the newscaster just said that they had their hands tied behind their backs. Now you're talking about throwing grenades. Like, even the normie who was fed all of that propaganda is going to be like, something seems a little bit off. Just something.
It just, the fact that she never missed a step. She's like, because it's like, listen, all these bodies are found, mass grave. How do you explain it? Well, I'm sure they were all terrorists who died in gunfights with Israel. Okay, some of them had their hands tied behind their back, and it got worse too. She didn't mention
evidence,
how a lot of them
being buried alive.
Yeah, being buried alive. There were some like hospital patients with gowns and catheters. Like, you're telling man, like, look, I know you guys say that Hamas, tries their best to blend in, but holy shit, you're telling me they put in a lot. They put in a lot of fucking work to make themselves look like helpless patients here. This just shows.
I want the gown where my butt's out. Like, that's
right? Yeah,
like, no.
This just proves that Hamas is far more sinister than we even thought before. It's all there to say.
Also, we've never seen anything like this before. Yes, you are right. We have never seen a genocide in real time to where I can pull up my phone and see firsthand accounts of the war crimes that your country has committed. You are correct. We've never seen anything like that before. Now, for you to say that no one has ever also fought against people who tunnel, I'm sorry, where were you during World War I? Oh, right. Sorry, Israel didn't even exist then.
It didn't exist in World War I. And also, I mean, yeah, they did exist during Vietnam. If I remember correctly, Vietnam vets talked about tunnels all the fucking time. And guess what? We didn't carp. Well, I guess we did carp.
No, we did. We also committed war crimes.
Yeah, to be fair, yeah.
You're not unique in the sense that you think you are. You're not unique in being moral. You are just like every other big state that decides, well, they're not even that big, but big funded. You're like every other state that just decides that it's going to commit war crimes and then it's going to get away with it. That's nothing new compared to what we've seen. It's just new because we can see it on our phones in real time.
Yes. It's to the point now that I think it's a lot bigger than like the college protests. That the college protests get the most eyeballs and everything, but we've been saying this for months now, but how the tide is shifting. Like, there is a segment of the population that's not going to move on it, and there's not. Yeah. But the more stuff that comes out, and the worse these explanations get, what I fear, what I almost would bank on this happening, is that eventually, I don't know how long it'll take, but eventually, most Americans are going to wake up. Kind of like what happened. It'll be a fast track version of what happened with the War on Terror. That we all started out for it. And then 15 years in, we're like, okay, all right, this is fucked up. And we did a lot of bad stuff. Going to happen a lot quicker when it's somebody else. But what I think is going to happen is that we'll just end up blaming Netanyahu. He's going to take, the public image fall for this and not the entire, the actual state, like the actual apparatus. Yeah.
I'm really worried about that. I think that we've been kind of starting to position that of like Biden's having tough conversations with Netanyahu behind the scenes to kind of, which is so fake. If you actually were having tough conversations, you wouldn't be funding his actions. Like, but I think that that's one of the things that I worry about the most is that it's going to be scapegoated into a few bad actors rather than the state that is built on being a settler colony, which inherently demands the destruction of the indigenous population. It's going to be like, oh, it's just one bad actor instead of the project that defines their nation, which is settler colonialism. And that to me is like, we can't let it happen. And I think that I'm excited about the young people because even in my circles, like back in 2021, when I made a pro-Palestine poster, which is still the one that's free to download on my website now. But when I made that, I got so much more backlash and resistance from left spaces and just honestly no interest. Like if it wasn't positive, then most of them just ignored it. And then the next step was just negative reactions. And to see the difference in terms of that to now gives me hope of the language, especially. Like before in 2021, when you said Israel is an apartheid, that was like, pearl clutching, how could you? And now, like, I'm out here being like, looking at what's his face? Oh God, the presidential candidate, Dean Phillips. Now I'm looking at Dean Phillips and I'm just looking at him straight in his eyes. And I'm like, yeah, Israel is a settler colony theocratic ethno-state that's committing genocide. And like, that is vocabulary that we are all kind of holding on to. And I think that that does give me hope. But yeah, I definitely think that the propaganda machine is going to try and scapegoat Netanyahu, which is why he's so interested in for it to continue. As long as it's continuing, he is safe. The second that it stops, he's going to face repercussions from the rest of the West that doesn't want to take the responsibility of supporting his actions. So they're just going to blame him.
Yeah. Kimberly, if you could write in the comment there which great point you were referencing there. Leah always makes a ton of them, so it's hard to keep track of them. But it's like, yeah, it is kind of frustrating, and I that part gets me too, because I don't know the future of that, the future of our support of this project of the colonial state of Israel. And I don't know how you feel about. I don't know if we talked about this before, but I'm not a big fan of the two-state solution thing. I don't think that it works. All right, good, okay, because this is what I've heard. Like that's the reasonable, rational explanation. Oh well, we see two states. Like no. Like, you think that's going to solve this fucking problem? First, you think Israel would ever do it, and second, if you did,
they literally say that they would never do it. They literally say that no matter what. Even when Hamas came and they were like, we will accept 67 borders, which is inherently a two-state solution, Israel was like, no. Okay, so you're not interested in anything. And I think that, to me, what I always say is that I'm for a one state, hopefully named Palestine. But I will admit that that is something that may be up for debate. I don't think
I can work with that. Be. The name,
the name that is where I will compromise. Is maybe exactly. The name, and even then, I'm kind of still hardlining it. But I think that it should be a one democratic state that has equal rights for all. Oh yeah, the scapegoating, yeah, it's unfortunately very likely. And so that to me is something where I'm like, I got distracted by the scapegoating.
Oh, sorry. No. you were talking about the single state solution is the only
that doesn't make me go. That actually makes me very happy. It needs to be a one state democratic. It needs to not be an ethno state. And everyone needs to have equal rights for all. But it also, not that everyone is like, so you want to kick out all of the Jewish people? First of all,
Jesus
Christ.
Significant
percentage of, and it has nothing to do with them being Jewish. It has definitely to do with Israeli citizenship. Mm-hmm. I would be for anyone who's an Israeli citizen to then have a path forward becoming a citizen in this new one state. However, I do think that given the large percentage of specifically Israeli citizens who are not even just first generation immigrants to Israel, but on top of that have dual citizenship, like, I would hope that we could have an incentive structure for those people who do have another home country to go to, that they have incentives to do so. Not that they are forced to do so, but that there are incentives to do that. Plus, we would need in this one state reparations for the Palestinian refugees to have a way to come home, and have not even just like a way to physically come home, but economically speaking, they need reparations to rebuild the societies that have been destroyed for 75 years. That is what I think we should be fighting for. But at the same time, like, I will say that I'll fall in line with especially whatever Palestinians in West Bank or in Gaza decide. So like, if they decide that 67 borders is what they are fighting for right now, then I'm on their side. Whatever they decide, I listen to. I will just take the furthest position that I think I can and push for that in hopes that we shift the Overton window to more concretely hover over the position that then they are having.
Yeah, it's true. It's not good enough to condemn Netanyahu. We need to condemn the government of Israel's actions as a whole. Absolutely agree, Kimberly. And it's a wild take on our part, but ethno states are bad. Just like I mean, I don't know.
Crazy idea, specifically theocratic ethno states. You know, there's just something about them. It makes me a wee bit.
Very odd. And so when you bring up like the solution, like, I don't think that, I forget what the name of the law is, like the Jewish nation state law that they have in Israel that basically says it needs to be a religious ethno state, that, the Jewish people have a unique right to self-determination. That's what it says, or something. And it's like, yeah, I don't think that's cool. I'm sorry. Like, you are gonna have to do a lot of work to defend that to me. And then they'll come back with arguments like, well, you know, there's Muslims say, yeah, I don't like that either. Like, you can't. That's not a defense.
Think that they've got a gotcha. And I'm like, first of all, I'm atheist, so like already. Second of all, I'm a secularist. Like I do fundamentally believe that we should be trying to create governments that are secular, i.e. from specifically organized religion.
I don't know what?
And like, I don't know why that's crazy. I'm also French, so that does influence it. And I will admit that the French have used that secularism to then implement levels of Islamophobia that I'm not for, that I do not support. But in terms of actually implementing religion in your state structure, I have nothing against you practicing your religion, but in your state structure that has citizens from all sorts of backgrounds, no.
It's like you guys, when you say this shit, that this is important, you guys haven't caught up with James fucking Madison. Like, I mean, you are so far back. Like, this is insane that you say this with a straight face.
And they think that it's a gotcha too, because they're like, see, that's why Jewish equals Israeli, because they are a Jewish state. And I'm like, no, because that does not include, one, all of Judaism, first and foremost. Second of all, it's a state that is using a religion to justify its actions in part. But two, like, you don't have to be against. I personally do not like organized religion. That is my own personal opinion. That is also from my background of being raised Catholic. I'm just not really for it.
It's also the correct opinion, so don't feel bad. It's also the correct opinion.
But that's the thing, is like, I'm not going to be against anyone practicing their religion. If you would like to practice Judaism in the one state solution of Palestine, I think that you should have every single right to practice it. It should have zero influence, just like Islam should have zero influence, just like Christianity should have zero influence. I just don't think that that's how we should be building our laws.
Not a difficult concept. And it's weird because they try it too, because it's like, oh, well, I remember someone criticizing Ilhan Omar years ago, talking about how she was having these, well thought out criticism of the actions of Israel. It's like, I don't see her criticizing Saudi Arabia. Yes, she does. Yes, she does. Because it's consistent. Like, it is like because I don't know. One, they're just stupid. You know, they don't know a whole lot. But it's like, if you guys criticize Saudi Arabia, like, we talk to a normal person, not some far right extremist or whatever. It's like, okay, you have criticism against Saudi Arabia, against Syria, against that doesn't mean you hate Islam, right? And they get that, like, they understand it. But when it comes to, it's like, oh, okay, so that's
really actually anti-Semitic, and I'm like, no.
It's like, that's not how this shit works. But so one thing that's brought up too is, like you mentioned, so like, it's self-determination. Whatever the people decide in this area, by secular means to govern amongst themselves. And they say, well, if we do that, their favorite answer is that, well, this is going to be complicated. They've been saying this whole time, it's always complicated. And it's like, well, it's going to be really, because like, yeah, that's how nation building works. And so that's how society works, how civilization works. It's never easy.
Full of contradictions. It's almost as if that's kind of inherent to them. That's one of my things too, is like, the gotcha moment of like, if Hamas were in power, then they would be implementing some sort of Islamic rule. And I'm like, okay. And all of that anyone says of like, I want to implement an Islamic theocratic state, I'm against. Does that mean that I'm going to condemn any sort of resistance against an active, ongoing genocide? No, that is not the same thing. And I also think that there's an important thing of like, a lot of people are like, oh, so then classic, because you're a communist, you hate all religion, and communism has banned religions in the past. And I'm like, yeah, as an anthropologist looking at that history, I don't think that that's the best way to go about it. I think that one of the best ways to minimize the effects of organized religion on our state apparatus is through education, not by banning different religions. I personally don't think that that's a good way forward. I think that if you educate people, a lot of them will slowly start leaning not as much towards their religion. Not saying that you can't be educated and still believe in your religion. I just think that is a trend that we will see. And I think that that's a much better way to go about it than banning it.
It's what literally always happens. Whenever you get more educated, like, people get realized.
It's almost as if that's why the Christians in power were so terrified of science. Like,
yeah, the problem takes care of itself. And one of these days, real quick before I close up here, another thing that they'll say where it gets complicated is like, well, these two groups of people have been at odds with each other for so long that there's no way. There's like, okay, what I love to ask is, okay, would you have given freed slaves the right to vote? And that's what because like that's essentially what we're dealing with here. It's like, would you have been in favor of, you know, full rights for South Africans after apartheid? Because it sounds like you wouldn't have been. Like, I'm just saying, and a lot of them are honest, they wouldn't. Let's be real. Like, a lot of them wouldn't do it. Yeah.
And I love it when they try to tiptoe around it. They're like, well, that was a different time. And I'm like,
yeah, if you were there, it wouldn't be a different time. I'm asking you what you would have said back then. And it's because back then they said, we're going to do it. Like back 1865. And they're like, all right, you know what? It's fucked up. We're going to give them the right to vote. You are arguing once again, like you guys are going fucking backwards. But I want to close, like, one of these days, I'd like to have you on again so we can talk about anthropology. Like, that sounds really fun. Like, I would love to have that conversation. And as you were talking about the banning religion, the French tried that in the French Revolution.
That's why when I said that I'm a secularist, as someone who's French, like, again, I have seen it.
Yeah,
many attempts at different forms of secularizing a country, and the current one is very Islamophobic. Not great. So I personally am just pro education.
So for those of you don't know, during the French Revolution, I think it was Robespierre. Like, they got rid of the clergy because it was corrupt as fuck. I get it. Like, I understand that. But he realized they secularized a lot of the nation. Like, they stopped using a 7-day week. And
a lot of kids were named after saints, and they stopped doing that too, as like officially as it was before.
But my favorite part is he realized something that turns out to be true with a lot of people, is that one problem that we have as secularists is that church, or just organized religion in general, fills a lot of roles in people's lives that are very important, that is hard to replace when you take the church away. Where are you going to get married? Where are you going to have your funeral? Stuff like that, like stuff that really matters. And it's just hard. It's hard. And so Robespierre realized that. And so he started, what was it called? The cult of the supreme being. Like this like fake religion is created out of midair. And of course it completely crashed and burned, because you can't, that's not how this shit works, man. You can't just force this. You need like hundreds of years of nonsense, or like a really good like sci-fi writing career like L. Ron Hubbard before you get people to buy into your religion. I saw something like that. But I want to close up here. I was going to ask you I don't even know if you know the answer to this. This is a content creator question. So those of you watching, I'm sorry if you don't. But do you know how to do a TikTok video where you put a song, like a what's it called, like a sound on top of your voice? Because whenever I try, it tells me you can't record if you have a sound. Like, I don't know. Have you run across that? Have you ever done a video with a sound? I never have.
Yeah. Okay. So I recently just did my first video with I used the sounds from like, it was the classic one of someone screaming versus the do. And I realized, so the do, you can't actually, from my experience of doing it on TikTok, and it may be different on CapCut, but I stopped using CapCut because it took so much storage on my phone. TikTok already takes so much storage on my phone that I was like, I have a really bad phone. So I don't know if it's different on CapCut, and you may have better odds with that because they have much better on CapCut. I
haven't tried CapCut. I haven't tried it on CapCut.
They have a lot better audio recording stuff, and they have a thing where you can sign up for the free trial, and then you just cancel it right after, where you can extract the audio from your video on CapCut, and that may be useful for what you want to do. Okay. But the only way that you can change your voice is if you do, in my experience, I've only been able to change my voice if specifically it's a voice over. And then you have to click one of the voice characters that you can use, but you can only do it if it's a voiceover. And so that's why if you have any sound under the voiceover, that can trip it up. But for the sounds, you can only use one in my experience, and you can't like time it. Like, it just starts. So like, so if you want it for a specific time, and like you can't do back-to-back different audios, again, I'm not the best at this, so like maybe take everything.
I just want it playing through the whole video. Like, I just wanted one sound, like playing through the whole video.
Then that you should just be able to find the sound. The way that I find them is I try and find videos that either would have them of like, for the do. I think I did like playful music, something of this sort, and then you find it and then save it in your favorites and then use it.
Oh, okay. Because all right, because whenever I tried clicking it from the video, the microphone went away immediately. But okay, save it and then try. Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, and then you use it in the same way that you would use like music. Like you know how when you're recording, how there's that top button that's at the top that says add sound. That's where then you can find, especially if you have them saved, it's super easy.
Okay, all right, cool. A video I wanted to make was I saw a tweet asking, what are your favorite Trumpisms that you use in real life? I was like, oh my God, I do use Trumpisms in real life. I do. Like Donald Trump, as much as I hate the guy, he does live rent-free in everyone's brain, and he will until the day we die. It's unfortunate, like he won.
I mean, like Kofefe. That's the one that I'm like, the way that it hooked my brain, and I don't know why it did. He didn't even mean it like that.
He didn't mean it. That was an accident.
Every time I'm like, do you want to go get some Kofefe? Like, why?
Oh, that's funny. That's so funny. I didn't think of Kofefe. The ones I thought of many people are saying. I use that one all the time. I think it's very funny. This one I only use when I'm writing it out. I write out sad with an exclamation mark. I think that's pretty funny. What other ones do I use? Looking into it very strongly. Something because it sounds so stupid. Like it's a phrase I've never heard. Who would say that? It's like, yeah, we're taking a good look at this, or we're looking at this carefully. We're looking at it very strongly. And another one I like. Oh, my all-time favorite. This will be my number one. Sneak preview here, everyone listening, is that tears in their eyes. I love tears in their eyes. Like big men, strong men, tears in their eyes. It's just so goddamn over the top. I can't stand it.
He's not a natural like I would say that he's a natural entertainer, and in today's world and society that can easily translate to politics and leadership. Do I think that it should be that way? No. But like, my God, is he an entertainer? Like,
listen,
he's just so funny.
He is so goddamn entertaining. Like, this is where I get tripped up with lefties or liberals a lot, where they'll say like, Trump isn't funny. Fuck you. Donald Trump he's not only unintentionally funny, he's literally like, he has great comedic timing, I mean, like, he reads a room like no one's like, it's so goddamn unfortunate that he's a horrible human being because he does have great entertainment skills. He really does.
And that he's a raging narcissist. One of my favorite, and this is what I will end on. You know that video? This lives rent free in my mind so much. Like an unhealthy amount is that Halloween video of Trump and Melania with the minion, and they put the chocolate bar on the child's head.
It's so funny.
Into the bag of another child, and that just doesn't get it.
Remember when
Melania copied?
Yeah.
Oh, it's too good.
It's too good. Remember when he was on the phone with a kid on Christmas and he's like, oh, so what are you, 8 years old? Do you still believe in Santa? Because it's kind of marginal at this point. Like that's something I would do. Like, that's really funny. Like, that's good. It's so good. So good.
I remember on Halloween this year, I shared that video because, again, it lives rent free in my head. And I had so many people being like, why are you sharing this? He sucks as a person. It's funny.
Funny is funny, folks. Funny is funny. Okay. It's all right. We'll wrap it up here. So, Leah, tell the good folks where they can find your content, if you would.
Yeah, of course. So you can find me on TikTok at PTITE_. LIA, not the easiest one to write out. Sorry about that. So it's just literally my name, but then with like a fake French word in front of it. And then you can find me on Twitter, and you can find me on Instagram at Socialistsloots. So socialist, as in spelled completely the same, and then SLOOTS.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much, Leah. Well, all right. So I recommend you actually get to work. Time is wasted, but
I've got 7 hours to finish.
7 hours, plenty of time. Plenty of time. All right. We appreciate you coming on. Well, I'll have you back again. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.